Stay tuned to find out why the Boxing Day tsunami of 2004 wouldn't have been half as bad if coral reefs were more protected, why killing out the vultures in India cost the country in excess of $30 billion, and why an explosion of jellyfish in our oceans and waters is the sign of a sixth mass extinction. Hi, welcome back to Green Pages. It's Rebecca here from Kawano. So I've just finished reading What Has Nature Ever Done for Us? How Money Really Does Grow on Trees by Tony Juniper. Who's it for? Anyone that's interested in economics and understanding just how much as a human race we are dependent on nature, as well as anybody that has maybe friends or family or colleagues that are a little bit skeptical about the importance of protecting our planet and nature. This book will give you some really great stats and stories to just drop into the conversation, as well as for anybody that would like a bit more context as to why Harrison Ford, the very famous actor, stood up and spoke at the World Government Summit and spoke and said, "Nature doesn't need people, people need nature." This book is a great foundation to understand exactly why he said that. So what were some of the key takeaways for me from this book? Well, the first one, take a deep breath with me. 50% of that oxygen you just breathed in probably came from tiny marine forms in our ocean, the same ones that help make it rain. Once you learn just how dependent we are as humans on the importance as such as basic as breathing, how important it is to protect our oceans. It was a real eye-opener for me of just how much, just for the basics of breathing, we depend on the healthy nature of our oceans, and therefore why we need to take better care of them. The second key takeaway from this book was the chapter about Costa Rica. Now, most of you probably know Costa Rica has become a place known to nature lovers. It's a paradise for eco-conscious travellers, and it is fast becoming the #1 place for ecotourism. But it wasn't always that way, and I was interested to know how that came about. Costa Rica is very close to the US in proximity, and essentially there was a huge demand for beef due to the fast food industry back in 1970s. During that decade, Costa Rica had the highest deforestation rate per capita in the world. And that's really hard to believe that, looking at just how amazing a place it is now. I absolutely loved the bit in the book where Tony cited where the finance minister at the time of Costa Rica had said that they needed to focus on infrastructure and health and education, and nature just wasn't a priority. But Carlos, the minister at the time, went back to this finance minister and he proved that less trees meant less water, and less water meant not only the obvious impacts of that, but actually less power for the country because they use their power through turning turbines. Costa Rica proved that natural capital can be protected and restored at the same time as achieving economic development. The third takeaway from this book for me was the numbers of jellyfish which are exploding in our oceans. Now, this is due to a whole combat of activities from overfishing to acidification of our oceans, climate change, pollution. This explosion of jellyfish, we're not talking just a couple of hundred, we're talking a soup of jellyfish that's been found is 60 miles long, with jellyfish as large as refrigerators. Essentially, fewer fish in our oceans equals more jellyfish. In the book specifically, talks about Japan, Mediterranean, and even the north coast of England. Interestingly, jellyfish existed way before us humans did. They've survived 5 mass extinctions on this earth. And today, why scientists are saying that they're exploding in numbers is we are creating conditions similar to what these creatures first experienced when they first appeared. So what were some of the favourite moments for me from this book? Well, one of the first was the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami, and the chapter in which the researchers look into the circumstances that shape different impacts of where the tsunami had hit. Essentially, where Tony talks about in this book that really caught my attention was that they compared areas that had protected mangroves and the vegetation and the coral reefs there, compared to areas where the coral reefs have been completely degraded by dynamite fishing, tourism, all sorts of different things, as well as mangrove destruction, and had compared the levels of impact and destruction from the tsunami when the coral reefs were absent. Because essentially what they were doing is creating an almost underwater breakwater system, which meant the wall of water that came inland was actually significantly less, sometimes up to 80% less. That's huge. This chapter was one of my favourites because it really relates to the chapter of the book, What Has Nature Ever Done for Us? The moment there was absence of nature that had previously been there, that's when people felt the impact the most. There's an area in Sri Lanka, there's a marine park where there's coral reefs, and the wall of water that had measured coming inland was about 2 to 3 metres high. The damage that had moved inland and caused destruction was about 50 metres. Compare that to an area of Sri Lanka where they'd completely degraded the coral reefs and ruined the nature and the wild areas. They'd actually experienced a 10-metre high wall of water, and 1,500 metres inland had destruction been recorded. That's a huge difference. One of my second favourite moments was a chapter called Eco-Innovation. Now, on this chapter, Tony talks about various different things nature does for us that goes almost completely unnoticed to the everyday person. If you've ever been to hospital, had injections or vaccines, you can thank the horseshoe crab, where we take some of this crab's blood in order to create a clotting reaction, which is absolutely essential to saving lives in hospitals. The book also talks about a number of other things which I've never known about, and many other people out there I'm sure don't know about just how much nature does for us. And that chapter was called Eco-Innovation. It was really interesting. The final favourite moment for me from this book was where Tony talks about the vultures in India. Now, Indian vultures today are virtually extinct. Only when they were gone were they noticed for the amazing support and well-being of hundreds of millions of people they impacted. The vultures performed an essential cleaning service of eating dead animals. So once the cattle or buffalo or cows had dropped dead and started rotting in the sun, vultures would sweep in and clean it up. With the vultures gone, this caused an explosion of wild dog numbers. We're talking feral dogs here, so wild dogs, and that caused an explosion of rabies in the country, which is obviously a disease once somebody's bitten by a dog. When looked at by a number of researchers, it was established that the removal of vultures had cost the country over $30 billion in terms of problems of medical. They'd also needed to then put in a system in order to remove the carcasses, which they'd never had to do before. So what has this book inspired me to do next? Well, one of the things is to look a little bit more into the discipline of biomimicry, which literally means mimicking nature, whether that's looking at shark skin technology to understand how that can help engineers to design better aeroplanes or motorboats in order to make them reduce the much of fuel they use, but also how they can increase their speed, or even using it in swimwear competitive brands. Would I recommend this book? Well, the number of times that I've brought conversations, stories, or bits that Tony talks about in the book into everyday conversations with family, friends, colleagues is a testament to what an amazing book is. And if he ever does see this, I want to thank him, because it really opened my eyes to how amazing nature is. I obviously love nature anyway, but this book helped me to fall in love with nature all again. Put my hand on my heart to say it's one of the best books I've read. Until next time, thanks for listening.